You're listening to the Startup Soirée podcast, episode number 11. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Startup Soirée podcast. Today's guest is Daric Snyder. This is Patrick Reif bringing you the goods. Daric is a local Baltimore kind of DIY journalist at the moment, and he has a cool idea about how to kind of reserve local news in a meaningful way that makes it a little more fun and easy to kind of get that info, and also maybe something a little more enjoyable to kind of participate with. So without further ado, I want to introduce Daric. Daric, thanks so much for being a guest on the Startup Soirée podcast.
Hey, Patrick. Thanks for having me on. I've been listening. You've got a good thing going here, and I'm glad to play a part today.
Oh, man, thanks so much. I have to be honest with you. Since we met, Nick and I both jumped on the Baltimore Rex newsletter every morning, so we get it every day. And no smoke being blown, we definitely talk about it, 4 out of the 5 days of the week we're kind of commenting on some article and not just the news that we're getting from it, but also kind of like the tone of it. It's cool. It's a really special voice. It feels so much like a really funny Twitter kind of handle, and in kind of the way that it serves it off. So congratulations on creating something that's kind of immediately so unique.
That's great. I really appreciate hearing that, and I've heard a little bit of that feedback already, and it really helps to keep me going. But you're right. I really think that there's something important in trying to provide a little bit more of a personal voice and a tone to the news that often gets lost these days. So just a little background on me. As you mentioned, my name's Daric Snyder. I come from a background of building websites. I've done web design. I've also worked as a journalist, and that's kind of led me to this weird intersection between building things for the web and doing good work that helps get journalism out there. I used to work for a small nonprofit in DC called the National Press Foundation that was focused on educating journalists and getting them resources so they could do their jobs better. We did a lot of work focused on training them on difficult, complex topics, whether it was focused in on doing coverage of Congress or a lot of the subcommittees and other weird institutions in Washington, as well as a lot of public health things. A lot of the reporters that are doing work on cancer or Alzheimer's disease or any of these other chronic issues that we face often don't have medical degrees, don't have those backgrounds, and it's really potentially dangerous if they don't have that information to just spout what a pharmaceutical rep or what whoever else who has some kind of stake in it. So what our hope and what we were trying to do is really educate journalists so they would be more ready to go out and report their own stories. And what I was adding in on top of that was digital assets and resources that could go on and further educate these journalists. Beyond that, I've spent most of the last few years working at Baltimore Magazine, running their online department. They've got a really great thing going on the web now. They've taken this beautifully designed print magazine, and with what a lot of the work that we did over the last few years is take a lot of that experience and apply it to the web, and then go beyond that to do things that are great just for the web, whether it's video or a few different blogs that really give additional coverage to the things that people love about that magazine. And after we did this major relaunch last year, I was thinking to myself, all right, well, what is it that I want to do next? And at the same time, being really plugged in here since I moved to Baltimore, seeing a lot of need for better ways for people to follow the news, especially younger people. I live here downtown. I live just north of Patterson Park. And there's a lot of younger people that are moving into the city, a lot of people who've been here a long time. But they're never going to subscribe to the Baltimore Sun. They're not going to watch the 5 p.m. news. Maybe they listen to the radio and they get news that way, but more and more people are doing things like Spotify, even in the car. So, how are they going to hear about it? Maybe, like you said, they're going to find a really good Twitter account or a few and follow that, or do the same on Facebook or Instagram. And there's definitely a place for that. But as anybody can tell you, it can get really noisy really fast. There's a lot of people out there that are trying to just pump. Look at this, look at this, look at this, click on this, watch this video, and oh, there's a ton of ads all along the way. And I mean, to some degree, you can't blame the big companies for needing to do this. I mean, that's how they make their money online. Is they need you to look at not just one thing, but a lot of different things, and they need you to look at the ads too. Unfortunately, this has kind of created an experience that's not really good and not really enjoyable. And frankly, it's just off-putting to a lot of people. So I created this company, this product called Baltimore Rex, completely focused on saying, well, what do you need to get in and out on local news? The first iteration of that is this daily email newsletter that's been going out now for a few months. I'm glad to have you as a subscriber. That, again, just lays out the top 4 to 6 stories of the day and goes a little bit beyond the headline to kind of explain what's going on, the most important takeaway facts, the things you really want to know and share as you go about your day, and does it in a way that's like, I don't need you to click on 20 different things. I'd like you to spend 2 to 3 minutes with it every morning, get what you need, and go on with your life. I think that's the best way to really get a lot of people who aren't going to subscribe to one of these more traditional ways of getting the news on board with what's going on in their community. So that's been the focus and the priority for me with Baltimore Rex. In and of itself, it's not something that really makes money right now. I've got some plans for that down the road. In the meantime, I'm working as a consultant, as a freelancer, doing web design and development projects, user experience, and a lot of different consulting work related around that. Helping other businesses to kind of realize a lot of the opportunities that are out there.
Awesome. Great way to start it off. I have a few different ways to split it off, but they're almost equal distance. So you'll have to forbid me for choosing one maybe before the other, but whatever, here we go. So I'm curious about what is your, what is your journalistic point of view for Baltimore Rex? But also, what is your goal for it? Because I feel like those are kind of two different things. It seems like something that you're kind of, right at the edge of kind of grappling with, is that you want to serve content on a little bit different, like there's like a mea culpa or something. So I just wonder maybe if you would speak to that a little.
Absolutely. I would say my goal with Baltimore Rex and its current version and anything that will come further down the road is that I want it not only to be easier for people to pay attention to what's happening in Baltimore, and again, it's mostly focused very much on Baltimore City. That was a conscious decision, again, to really focus in on a target audience of people mostly under the age of 40, I would say, who do live in the city and probably haven't been here their whole lives or grew up in the suburbs or whatever else, and now they're making a home for themselves in the city. The goal with that is by making an opportunity make it easier for people to pay attention, that they'll be more engaged with the community themselves. My personal politics lean a little bit to the progressive side, as much as that matters, and I'm not sure as much as it does to be transparent about what I'm trying to do with the news. My goal, again, is just to get people to pay attention and to be involved. If people, I occasionally, because I try to make it very personal as far as the way that I write and present the news, much like if you're somebody who gets your news from like The Daily Show, which for better or worse people do, some of that opinion definitely bleeds through. My way of dealing with that is to try to be very transparent about where I'm coming from and what it is, the goals that I have by presenting things in a certain way. For me, the biggest thing is I don't really necessarily care if people agree with the viewpoint that I'm putting forward when there is a visible viewpoint, as much as it gets them engaged and paying attention. We had an election here in the city a few months ago back in November, and the turnout was incredibly low, especially for young people. Really, really low. It was like very close to 25% or not even, which is disappointing. It really makes you wonder what would happen if more people were paying attention. And what we're seeing now at like the state house level and, even within city government are some of the consequences of that. So part of my hope as far as the impact of Baltimore Rex is to get more young people engaged with their community, whether that's just giving them enough information so they actually know something about their local elected officials and what they stand for, or actually get them out there engaged and involved beyond voting. Those are some of the goals for that, at least from that standpoint. On the other side too, I am really interested in the business aspects of doing something like this. There's a lot of hand wringing involved with where digital media is headed, how we're all going to pay for it. When you have giant newspapers, broadcast media companies that are really struggling to deal with the web, and even digital only outlets are struggling to deal with the economics of the web. So I think that's also an interesting challenge, and it's something that I continue to hope to work on and maybe try to come up with some better solutions for local businesses that want to reach an audience through digital media instead of through print advertising and broadcast advertising.
Daric, help me remember again, living in Baltimore, but you're not a Baltimore native, correct?
No. I've been here for just about 2 years. I've been working up here. I was commuting from DC for over a year prior to that. My wife and I were in DC for about 3 years. I was in New York before that for a little while. And I grew up in Indiana. Went to school out in Indiana.
So in terms of, I'm just curious, I mean, what you're doing has a very local bent to it.
Right.
And I know, and we've had conversations and there's always a great version of every effort that we're working on that can scale and tell local stories in a larger way, or et cetera, et cetera. But I'm just curious, as a non-native, where does your interest in serving as the conduit for local news in this new way and having it be kind of something that is so intimately tied into like a city where why Baltimore?
Well, I think it came initially from my need to satisfy my own curiosity. First as somebody who was commuting into the city every day to somebody who, was buying a house and living here. It's really something where, because you're coming at it from an outsider, you have a lot of questions. Is why does this work this way? Or, historically, what led to the current situation? Or, what are the things we're celebrating? What are the things that went wrong? As somebody who kind of has this sort of news and journalism background, that sort of community involvement has always been on my mind. And, really falling in love with this place, which is how I describe it, is, we came to Baltimore and we fell in love with it. And, now we're trying to carve out lives here for ourselves. And I'm trying to think of ways that I can use my skills to really contribute back to this community. There are a lot of unmet needs. Baltimore Rex doesn't even come close to handling a lot of the things as far as how people get their news and information that'll need to be fixed down the road. But basically, I would say I started with my own curiosity and went from there, and really, going constantly to try to challenge my assumptions about how certain things have come to be the way that they are, and frankly, how they could be better.
So in 2011, were you living in Washington?
Yes.
And what were you doing down there?
I was working for the National Press Foundation, as I mentioned earlier.
So if you don't mind me kind of delving a little bit, and please correct me if I'm being assumptive, but for me, I definitely get there's this tone that is present even just in the email, and I feel like it's I don't know why. I don't know if it's the X that's in the name of Baltimore Rex, but for me, it definitely conjures. There's this very DIY ethos that that feels a little bit instilled in it. Am I wrong about that?
In in what sense? I guess I'm not completely following what you're
Well,
saying.
I guess I feel like I don't know. I feel like there's a little bit of kind of the presence of like the new news, if you will. The like as far as the voice is concerned. So it makes me think about Red Emma's a little bit. It makes me think a little bit about like the Occupy movement, but not like in like a cloaking. Like I don't mean like as an affiliate to, but I mean
Right.
a little bit as in the and the goals that those efforts served ultimately, and like the positive goals that those efforts served. I feel like kind of what you're doing is a little bit not reminiscent of it, but it's evocative of kind of that same spirit of trying to create
Okay.
an alternative voice that takes power back via media still, via still like circulated news outleted media, but that has credentials to it and can be, held accountable, I guess. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I would say that you're absolutely correct in a sense. One of the things we've witnessed over the last few years, and something I absolutely think that traditional or legacy media or whatever you want to call it hasn't really come around to, is this idea that we went from this sort of like push broadcast sort of mentality, like here's the newspaper, here's the nightly news, to this era of social media where you see things like Occupy Wall Street and all of these other movements that have come up in the last few years that directly respond to the idea that we're all talking to each other now, and it's great, and it's fundamentally subversive in some ways, but one of the great things about the time that we're living in is that you get to hear so many voices that weren't necessarily represented previously or were represented in a specific way. What I'm hoping to do with Rex is to provide kind of an organized entry into that conversation versus, handing down the news from on high. If that makes any sense, of trying to be an engaged member of that conversation, where
Absolutely.
where it doesn't necessarily matter if everyone who reads Rex agrees with the way or the light that I put certain events in, but it's something that they can engage with and challenge and be involved with. I'm absolutely fascinated and really, the conversational tone has kind of stemmed out of what you see of people locally talking about in Baltimore, whether on Twitter or Facebook, in the better places where conversations can actually happen, and not places like the comment section of the Sun website or other garbage dumps on the internet, and there are a lot of them. People like to dismiss a lot of this based on the absolute negativity, or in some cases like the horrible racism that we saw happening in like a neighborhood Facebook group just last week that got a lot of attention.
Sure, I saw that.
Right. So, there's definitely a lot of interesting things happening. And I think paying attention to all the voices that are out there and trying to take a conversational approach to news will really pay off in the long run. It'll be interesting to see if this continues to grow and we're actually doing more in ways of independent, like actual reporting, how that will play out. But, so far the response I've seen and from what I'm hearing elsewhere is that this will probably be a lot similar to the way that more people get their news down the road.
So I'm curious, man. I have just a ton of questions. I'm curious what you see as being the way that Baltimore Rex, how it scales to maximum effectiveness, to what you see as being your kind of like ideal at this moment. And I realize that pivots, but like, what
Right.
is, if there's something about it that catches, that you most want to catch, the most important part of the cog? Is it the engagement process? Is it, because even to a degree, and like right now, but any news outlet that wants to kind of achieve what you're trying to achieve, which is to kind of like get a fairly like widespread demographic going on, you have to be, and I don't mean this in a derogatory sense,
Right.
but you have to be a little BuzzFeedy in terms of you need to make sure that you mix up like different types of content that is going to catch the, you want, how many, do you put 5 or 10 stories out, or 8 stories or 7 stories? How many is it in Baltimore Rex every day?
It's focused around 5.
5.
But
So like that, you've got 5 jabs that you get to hit and make sure that like, and at some point, you're going to want to start floating original content in, and you'll get 4, kind of jabs that you can hit. Shout out to Gary Vaynerchuk right there. But you can have like, you have to kind of be choosy about that. So I'm just curious about where you would, what you see, once you don't have to kind of do all of that stuff to make sure that you're kind of hitting in all the places. How would you see it? What would be the best case scenario of kind of how it catches?
I would see, and you're absolutely right. This is something that's shifting all the time. And people talk about having, 2-year, 5-year, 10-year goals. And in media right now, it is so volatile that if anybody's like, well, I know exactly what it's going to look like in 5 years, they're lying or they're crazy. For me, what my goal is to have a role in that conversation. I don't necessarily want it to grow to something where it's touching 1 million people, but only because they saw a BuzzFeedy style link to an article there. Which, don't get me wrong, I am a huge fan of BuzzFeed. I think that the model that they've chosen and the way that they're doing journalism right now is actually incredibly vital, important, and there's a ton to learn from it. But it's not exactly what I'm trying to do here. What I would much rather see is to have a product or a series of products that were maybe touching somewhere between 5 and 50,000 people, but we're doing so in a way that was meaningful, quantifiable, and engage in that sort of conversational way. I don't think that it's realistic for Rex to become the only touch point that someone would have with news and local information if they're actually interested in it and concerned about it. What I would like it to see is become a vital, entrenched part of the conversation, where if there's something that's relevant and important happening in Baltimore, that it is something that you can find out about through Rex, that if you don't know how to feel about it or you don't understand what's going on, that it's a good starting point. And that might look something like the email digest that's going out right now. It could look like a more aggressive web presence and social media presence, which, as you know perfectly well, have their own kind of rhythms and rules about what works, what gets people's attention, what gets people involved. Increasingly, I think that over time, the venue and the medium for this is going to be video. And that's just from looking at the numbers that you see elsewhere, and just kind of the reality I think that a lot of people are seeing in their lives is they're doing more and watching more video from the web, especially young people. It's so vital now, and
Sure.
I can't imagine
Sure.
not having that be the central way. There was just a big research report from the Pew Research Center that looked at how most people get their local news, and it's through television, which makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, if you are somebody who, like a lot of people or an increasing number of people who doesn't have a cable subscription and maybe doesn't even have a broadcast antenna in their home because all they do is they watch Netflix and Hulu and all of that, where are you getting your local news then? Where are those people going to go down the road? Maybe they'll go nowhere, or maybe we'll continue to work on trying to find ways to do video in an effective way that's part of that conversation, that's shareable and engageable and fits into the world that people are living in now.
Sure, definitely. Man, so much stuff. I could ask you so many questions, Daric. I'm having a great conversation here. Unfortunately, I have really don't have time, but I have to ask this question because I'm so curious. So I've got one more, and then I'll ask you to wrap it up. I'm curious if you're thinking about the peer-to-peer social platforms in terms of distributing your content. I am steeping my brain in all things Snapchat, Meerkat, and Cyberdust at the moment, and really kind of being a little bit excited that I know about these things when they're happening as opposed to years after they have happened. I was definitely behind the wave on Instagram and a little bit kind of, I don't know. I didn't really care so much about Vine, even though I knew about it kind of right when it happened. So I'm just curious if you're thinking about serving content in terms of reaching younger demographics, in terms of producing more fun, more participatory channels through which you can distribute that stuff. Are you thinking about those at all? Do you know anyone that you've spoken with that is?
I'm absolutely thinking about it, and it's just a matter of getting out there and doing it. I hope that some of this is stuff I'll be doing here within days and weeks and not months and years. But you'd have to be crazy not to at this point, especially if I believe all of the things I just said about wanting to be a part of a conversation and just a contextual part of the news as opposed to just being something definitive. That requires going where the people are. And if you've seen any of the numbers about like this new Snapchat Discover platform, or what people have started doing with things like Meerkat and even things that have been around a while now, like Instagram video and Vine, that it's something that would definitely have to go and try to find ways to get people engaged with news and figure out what that content looks like. I don't really think anybody knows quite yet.
We got to craft it. We get to create it. If we get in there,
I know it's really exciting, and I'm willing and ready to make mistakes along the way.
So I must confess, I had totally scheduled a Meerkat broadcasting of me recording this podcast, and I just fucking realized that I blew it, and I'm so bummed. But I have
there
another.
Are two heartbroken people out there.
I have another podcast at 3, and I'm going to reset it up. So I hopefully don't blow that. So you can at least tune in a half an hour, Daric, and watch me do this again with someone else. Hey, man, this has been a really fascinating conversation. I feel like it merits a continuation. So it's a great moment before I give you your moment to shine here to also mention that Daric is going to start writing a regular to semi-regular column. He's going to be a guest blogger on the Startup Soirée blog. Hopefully all of you out there are RSSing and getting the content that we're writing pretty regularly. I guess at this point it's up to kind of 3 or 4 blog posts a week. But now you're going to occasionally see some content from Daric. And the first post that he's written for us is called 5 Things I Relearned Since I Quit My Job and Started a Business. And you're going to see that on the Startup Soirée blog probably before you hear this podcast. But if for some reason you miss it, we'll link to it. You can go back and check it out. But Daric, before we go, please let everybody out there know kind of best place to contact you and the stuff that you want to talk about, to be contacted about, and whatever else you want to say.
Absolutely. Thanks, Patrick. And again, thank you for having me on today. You can reach me. I'm on Twitter at Daric Snyder. It used to be just at Daric, but that was a long story. In short, I sold it to some startup. But I'm at Daric Snyder, DaricSnyder.com. You can email me there. It should be pretty easy. And the Baltimore Rex is at BaltimoreRex.com, and on Twitter and Facebook as Baltimore Rex. Please check it out. Please subscribe to the email newsletter. That's the best way to really see what we're doing on a daily basis. But we're ramping things up on social and on the web too. So I hope you have a chance to check that out.
All right. You hear it, people. Another awesome homie on the Soirée podcast. A few notes to you. Please make sure that you check out the show notes. We'll have all of the details for Daric, links to the website, links to their social platforms, so you can follow along and start getting your local news. aside from that, we took the lid off of it. We're going to move into some of these peer-to-peer spaces. So if any of you are on Snapchat or Meerkat or Cyberdust, check us out at Startup Soirée. We're going to be doing fun things like meerkatting, me recording these podcasts, and Q&As with Rachel and Jess and Nick and myself, and hopefully lots of cool interactive demo-y fun stuff, because it seems like that's the way that the Fiddler's supposed to go for that. Again, if you are on your iTunes podcaster, please hit the subscribe button. And if you have a second, head over to the iTunes store and leave us a quick review. Your kind words help us get found by more people, and that is the goal for this whole thing. So until next time, people, thank you so much for tuning into the Startup Soiree podcast. This is Patrick Reif. Daric Snyder, thank you again for joining us today, bud. I look forward to seeing you soon.
All right. Thank you, Patrick.
All right. Thanks. Take care.
Bye.
Peace.